Hey everyone, it's Paul from Alexandria Knife Sharpening. So we've had a big influx of new people coming into the channel, which is great. But it also reminds me when I see a lot of the certain questions I get that I got to remind new sharpeners of certain things. And two just have come to mind this morning. One is Japanese knives. Be sure you're ready to take on Japanese knives. They are a different animal altogether. And you guys know I like to preach you don't need tons and tons of gear to do sharpening, but you don't want to take on a Japanese chisel grind chef's knife that's worth hundreds of dollars until you know what you're doing with it. And if you don't have the right gear for it, you should be passing on those jobs until you have the skills to handle that. Another one that I like to bring up, and this is why I wanted to bring it up now because I have them in the shop, and I've done videos on this in the past, but I just want to remind everybody because I know not everybody goes through all the old videos. But this is a knife from my buddy Jeff, who's a knife maker. And before you take on knives that somebody has made, there's certain things you need to be aware of getting into this. So this knife has never been sharpened, okay? And a lot of knife makers will have other people sharpen their knives. It's not uncommon. So some guys are really great at sharpening. Some guys are really great at making knives. Not uncommon for someone to send their knives out to be sharpened. This is not the same sharpening job as taking somebody's Henkels or Zwillings or Wüsthof and resharpening it, okay? This has currently on it about a 1 millimeter edge with no apex because it's never been sharpened, all right? This has about a 0.5, which, in the grand scheme of measurements doesn't seem like a lot, but in the scheme of removing metal when you're sharpening, it's a huge amount. So if you were to take this on as a new sharpener, and let's say you're only working with a Ken Onion Elite or even a 1x30, the amount of grinding that you're going to have to do here before you even get to sharpening is pretty significant. So I just want you guys to be aware of that. So that's why, I always have the links up there so you guys can see my website. Go take a look at it and you'll see I have a couple warnings on my thing. Like one, homemade knives, knife maker knives are by quote. And the reason for that is because they take more time. So, I've worked with Jeff before. I've talked to him about what I expect from knives that come in. But be aware of that before you take that on, because where I charge $10 for just sharpening a chef's knife, that's not the same. This is not the same animal, okay? And if you're working with a TS Prof or just something like that, even a small, just a smaller belt sharpener, the amount of time that something like this is going to take you is not worth $10. And the amount of belts and things that you would go through. So if I was going to be doing this on a belt sharpener, I would probably be starting with about a 50 or 60 grit Cubitron to start taking off the metal. Now, what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to start this on a Jet low-speed grinder with CBN wheels to start putting a primary bevel on this. So just keep in mind, you may not have that kind of gear yet, and that's why this is one of the pitfalls that you have to be careful of to not make that mistake. And the reason I bring that up is because I've seen it happen a lot of times. The other warning I would say would be EDCs, okay? And I've mentioned this to a lot of new guys. If your skill level is not, right up there yet with doing high-end EDCs, you don't want to take on, sharpening somebody's $300 EDC. You want to make sure that you're not going to mess it up. I think the safest thing that you can start with is always, regular kitchenware, regular kitchen knives, your Henkels, your Wüsthofs, And, you know, and I would even put, you know, I wouldn't have a huge fear of your commercial Japanese knives, your Shuns and even your Miyabis. Now, when you start getting the Miyabis, you know, you're talking $300-$400, even $500 knives. You want to know what you're doing. You want to be careful. You make sure you have the right gear, but just keep that in mind. Okay. I know it's very tough. And when I started in the beginning, you don't want to say no to anybody. You don't want to turn anybody away because you think, well, they're never going to come back again. What I have found basically, there's tons and tons of work out there, and sometimes it's best to say no than to make a mistake that could cost you a lot. And this, I've seen this happen. You know, I've seen guys make a mistake and feel that they had to replace the person's knife. Well, that kind of, it's not a fun experience if it's a $300-$400 knife and you're having to replace it. That's my warning. Just be careful. Make sure you're ready for what you're doing. Understand it's okay to say no if you feel that something that you're not ready for. And I have another video on the EDCs, and I've talked about that many times. So, you know, I brought it up the other day in a video. There's kind of two owners out there. Some are really particular about their knives. So, you know, I wouldn't be doing EDCs until you know you're really good at it. And, you know, practice, buy some cheap ones. I've mentioned before, I always recommend you can go to TSA auctions on eBay and buy some confiscated ones for a small amount and dig into those and start sharpening those and get your skills good before you take on somebody's, you know, $500 Benchmade that you may only be charging $15 for, because if you mess it up, was it worth the $15 that you're not going to get because you damaged your knife? No. So just make sure you're ready for the work that you take on. Okay, so you'll notice here that I'm taking great care to keep this even. So unlike, you know, where you've seen some of my other videos where I'm like, you can stay on one side until you raise a burr, this is a little different animal because this knife doesn't have a primary bevel. So that's why I am making sure that I'm doing exactly equal amounts of strokes on this until I get it close to where it's going to have a good primary bevel. Now, let me zoom in here so you can see how nice this looks. Now, the other thing that I noticed was that on the tips here, so what I noticed was the tips were a little thinner. So when I was looking at this, and you might be able to catch that there, you can see I was actually starting to get a burr here because this is a little round. It's a rounded off on the ends and kind of straight in the middle. And you can see it's thicker in the middle. So now I'm kind of focusing on grinding that thick area to get that down, but still doing it equally because I want to keep it nice and even on both sides. But you can see this is a low-speed jet grinder going at 1700 RPMs, and you can see how long it's taking me. Imagine trying to do this on something much slower that doesn't, and that is a 180 grit CBN wheel. Okay, so if you don't have something that's low, this knife would make you insane if you had to sharpen it. You could literally spend hours doing it. All right, so that's the point of this video. So I'm gonna go from this 180 to a 350 grit, and then I'm gonna go to like my regular sharpening methods. This is 380 or 350 grit. And this won't take that much. We are starting to get into sharpening now. Okay, so the next half of this is just me sharpening this knife. I did speed it up 8 times the regular speed so that it doesn't take too long and bore everybody to death. But I do take breaks and tell you what's going on in between the sharpening, but I sped up a lot of the sharpening part. So now I got my primary bevel and I can get ready to do my regular sharpening on this. But I'm going to show you that this is already wicked sharp. I'll just deburr it here for a quick second. So you can see it's cutting pretty good, and this is at 350. So now we're just gonna make it even better. Tiny bit of burr back here still. It's getting hung up on just a little bit. Still sticking a little. Ah, there we go. Sometimes the paper gets it. Nope. Yeah, still got a little burr in the back. Still a little thick. Right here. I'm going to take a look under the scope. There's just a tiny bit of burr still on the right at the back. That hasn't come off yet because it needs a little more grinding. It's just a little thick back here. All right, I think I got that. I had a little bit of burr hanging on here at the very end. It was not making this knife cut in, but you can see we got it. All gone. Okay, just did a little bit of touch-up polishing to where we worked, and let's just, yeah, it's super sharp. Everything's looking good, nice and shiny, and this is ready to go back. So my goal here, and I hope the point came across, is that keep in mind, especially knives from knife makers or guys that made their own knives or are just getting into knife making, are inevitably going to take you a lot longer than a production, you know, Wusthof, Henkel's, Global, Shun, Miyabi. Those knives, typically you're only talking anywhere it could be as low as 3 or 4 minutes to probably shouldn't take you much more than 10 minutes to sharpen one of them. But this is a different animal, and I just want to make sure that you guys are aware of that. If you're going to take this on, this is something you need to be charging more on an hourly rate, not on a per piece rate, because as you can see here, this was sped up 8 times its normal speed. This took a lot longer than 10 minutes. All right, have a great day, everybody. I hope that helped you all out.